Hey everybody! We're going to read a book called Catching the Moon today. And it is written by Crystal Hubbard and illustrated by Randy DeBurke. So, do you guys know what an illustrator does? Snap your fingers if you know what the illustrator does. The illustrator does the pictures. The author writes the words, the illustrator does the pictures. Okay, take a look at this cover. Do you have any predictions to make? If you have a pencil and paper handy, you can write down a prediction that you have quickly. Quick version. Just a little note. So what do you think this story is going to be about? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. There's the cover page. Did anybody think that it's going to be about baseball and a girl that's playing baseball? You could be right, you know. Marcenia Lyle loved baseball. Bingo. She loved the powdery taste of dust clouds as she slid through them. She loved the way the sun heated her hair as she crouched in the outfield waiting for fly balls. And she loved the sting in the palm of her hand as the baseball slammed into it, right before tagging a runner out. If there was anything in the world better than baseball, Marcenia didn't know what it was. She dreamed of growing up to be a professional ball player, so she could play all the time. Can you see that? Peek around here to make sure that you can see the pictures. There you go. I wish I knew why you liked baseball so much, Mama sighed as she gently washed Marcenia's hair. Marcenia shrugged. Mama often questioned Marcenia's interest in baseball, particularly when she was washing the dirt out of her hair. It's just fun, Marcenia said, giving her mother the same response she always did. Playing with dolls is fun, said Mama. Marcenia blew a puff of lather from her palm. Not as much fun as baseball. After Marcenia crawled into bed, Papa appeared in the doorway. What did you learn in school today? He asked. Marcenia thought for a moment. Some history? Papa crossed his arms. And how did your team do in the game after school? Harold got a triple in his first at-bat, and Clarence tagged out 2 runners, Marcenia said eagerly. I struck out my first time at bat, but then I caught a deep fly ball that would have scored the tying run for the other team if I'd missed it. We won 11-10. Marcenia's smile gleamed like the noonday sun as she shared the details of her victory. We won the game, Marcenia said again. And you also ripped another dress, Papa said. Then he kissed Marcenia's cheek and turned off the light, leaving her alone with moonlight and shadows and her dream of becoming a baseball player. The tiny house was still. Marcenia could almost hear her mother's needle and thread moving through the fabric as she sat at the kitchen table mending Marcenia's dress. Do you know what mending means? Sewing up, fixing the rip. After a while, Marcenia heard Papa's voice. I wish she would think about school as much as she thinks about baseball. She wants to be a ball player when she grows up, Mama said with a sad chuckle. I just want her to be happy. She'll be what every other girl in this neighborhood will be, Papa grumbled. A teacher? A nurse? Or a maid, Mama said softly. I'm going to score 3 runs tomorrow, Marcenia promised the darkness as she clapped her hands over her ears. I'm going to hit a home run, too. So I think she could kind of hear her Mama and Papa's conversation. She didn't like it a whole lot. The next day after school, Marcenia went to the playground. The other girls stayed on the hardtop to play hopscotch, jump rope, or jacks. The boys were huddled at the mound, talking quietly. They cast excited glances at a man who was watching the field from the bleachers. Do you know who he is? Harold asked Marcenia as she joined the group. He tipped his head toward the man. That there is Mr. Gabby Street. He's running a baseball day camp this summer. Marcenia knew about Gabby Street. He was the manager for the St. Louis Cardinals. He had led the Cardinals to the National League pennant in 1930, and the Cardinals had topped that the next year by winning the 1931 World Series. "What's he want?" Marcenia asked. "Kids for baseball camp," Harold said. "It's going to be right here on this field every day except Sunday. Sundays are game days." "What's the cost?" Marcenia asked. "It's free," Clarence said. "All you need is your own glove and baseball cleats," Harold added. Marcenia could hardly contain her excitement. She would do anything to be one of the players in Mr. Street's camp. See Mr. Street right here? That afternoon, Marcenia played with a purpose. She scooped grounders, catching them into her body to make sure they didn't bounce away. She slid into second, keeping low so she wouldn't be tagged. She kept her eyes on each pitch, waiting for a good one to send over the fence. She scored 3 runs and hit a homer. When Mr. Street approached the players after the game, Marcenia crowded in close so he could see her. "I just saw some good ball," Mr. Street said, smiling. "Who wants to come to my baseball camp and really learn to play this game?" Every hand went up. Mr. Street shook them all. He shook Marcenia's hand last. "You've got a good arm, little miss, and you run fast, but I don't take girls in my camp." Marcenia looked down so no one would see her disappointment. She began striking dust from her dress. "Marcenia's been playing ball with us since we were little kids," Harold told Mr. Street. "She's the only player who ever gets to steal bases," Clarence said. Marcenia was pleased that her friends had come to her defense, but Mr. Street didn't change his mind. As she walked home, she thought about how these very same boys had teased her when she first started playing baseball with them. Then they saw that she could run, hit, and throw as well as they could. The teasing stopped. They had let her play. Marcenia decided to give Mr. Street a reason to change his mind. Every day Marcenia played baseball, and every day Mr. Street refused to invite her to his camp. Then came a day when Marcenia got tired of hearing him say no. "I don't take girls in my camp." That day, when she was on third base in the 9th inning of a tie game, she decided to steal home. When the pitcher drew back his arm to throw the ball to Harold, Marcenia lurched into motion. It is a pretty big deal to steal home. You don't see that happening too often. Do you think she's going to make it? The catcher snared the pitch in his glove and ran toward Marcenia to tag her out. Marcenia doubled back toward third. When the catcher threw the ball back to the third baseman, Marcenia turned and bolted toward home plate. As the ball sailed above her head, Marcenia pumped her arms and knees harder. With the ball speeding toward home, Marcenia dropped her weight and slid into home plate. She had stolen home and scored the winning run. While her teammates celebrated their victory, Marcenia planted her hands on her hips and faced Mr. Street. "I am a baseball player. I want to learn to play this game as well as I can. May I come to your camp?" "Well, little miss, if you can steal home, you can probably do anything you set your mind to," Mr. Street said. "You can come to camp, as long as you have equipment." Do you think she has the equipment she's going to need? We know that she has a glove. When Marcenia told her parents the good news about the camp that evening, her father was not pleased. "I don't like you acting like such a tomboy," he said, with a snap of his evening paper. "Besides, you know we don't have money to spend on—" "The camp's free," Marcenia said excitedly. "Equipment isn't free," said Papa. I have a glove, Marsenia said. Harold gave me his old one. You'll need cleats, and we don't have money for those. Papa added, so unless you're prepared to get them yourself, I think you'll have to forget about that camp. With another snap of Papa's newspaper, Marsenia felt her dream go out of reach. Mr. Street was at the field the next time Marsenia played. Before the game, she mustered all her strength to keep from crying. Mr. Street, she said, I can't come to your camp. I don't have cleats, and my father says we can't afford them, but thank you for inviting me. Although she was sad, Marsenia played as well as she always had. She loved baseball too much to not play with her whole heart. That night, unable to sleep, Marsenia gazed through her window at the full moon glowing in the sky. It was so round and bright, like a brand new baseball. She reached to the floor and took up her baseball glove. She put it on and punched the pocket, as if the moon would drop into it, like so many fly balls had before. Marsenia wondered sadly if Papa was right. Maybe girls didn't grow up to be baseball players. But playing baseball was her dream, and Marsenia just couldn't imagine doing anything else. Now, did you notice the moon, by the way? What does the moon look like? Do you see that? Didn't want you to miss that. Looks like a baseball, doesn't it? The next day after school, Marsenia was the first one at the playing field. Mr. Street was already there, and he waved Marsenia over. You're a good ball player, he said. I want good ball players for my camp. He handed Marsenia a box. What do you think's in it? And he watched as she opened it. Her eyes widened as she pulled out a shoe with each hand. These weren't just any shoes. They were real baseball cleats. Thank you, Mr. Street. Marsenia was so excited she could hardly squeeze out the words. She hugged the shoes to her chest. They were even better than stealing home. Don't you have a game to play? Mr. Street said, nodding toward the field. Yes, I do, Marsenia replied happily. Her fingers flew as they unbuckled her street shoes and laced on her new cleats. They fit perfectly. She ran in them, she jumped in them, she caught and slid in them, and she hit a home run in them. After the game, the boys rushed to Mr. Street, talking over one another about the game. Marsenia lingered at home plate. She stared at her feet, proud of the new scuffs and smudges on her shoes. They had been a little stiff at first, but now that she had played a good game of baseball in them, the cleats were exactly the way she wanted them to be. Mr. Street excused himself from the crowd of boys. I look forward to seeing you in camp, he said to Marsenia. She gave him a hopeful smile. But Marsenia knew she still had one more person to convince before she could officially accept Mr. Street's invitation. She ran home and waited anxiously for her father to arrive home from work. As soon as her father arrived, Marsenia showed him her new cleats. Now, Marsenia, where did you get these shoes? Papa asked sternly. Mr. Street gave them to me, Marsenia said. He wants me to come to his baseball camp. Papa looked down at Marsenia's baseball cleats, which were already scuffed and dusted with field dirt. You must be a pretty good ball player for an important man like Mr. Street to buy you those shoes, he admitted. Then he smiled. You know I don't like charity, but I reckon we can't give those shoes back in this state. I'll have to thank Mr. Street for his generosity when I take you down to that baseball camp. Marsenia could hardly believe her ears. Papa had agreed. Her chest filled with joy, and she threw her arms around her father, hugging him hard. You'll see how good I am, she cried. Marsenia felt as proud and happy as if she had reached right up in the sky and caught the moon in her glove. she was on her way to becoming a real baseball player. She would make her dream come true. Okay, boys and girls, we're going to talk about Marcenia a little bit and the type of person that she is. And we talked before about character traits, and those are the things that are inside of you, the things that make you you, inside your heart and your soul. Then we have characters' actions, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the characters' actions and how the actions, the things that they do in the story, help you understand more about that character. So first of all, we all know who that main character was in that story, correct? Who was that main character? That was Marcenia. And so what a character does gives insight into who he or she is. So we're going to talk about some of the things that Marcenia did in that story that tell us more about her. So think about determined people. What do people who are determined? Determined would be that character trait. What are some actions we could see from someone who is determined? And I wrote a couple ideas on here. I don't know if you can see them or not, but we'll talk about those. Someone who's determined, like Marcenia, she worked hard. Would you agree that she worked really hard to become a good baseball player? She definitely played hard. And she was pretty brave, because that child stole home plate. You don't see too many people stealing home in a baseball game. If any of you play baseball or softball, I wonder if you've ever seen somebody try to steal home. It's a tough thing to do, and there aren't too many coaches that want you trying it either. You have to know what you're doing and really be ready. So, how do they act? So one of the things that I put about you, I keep forgetting her name, I'm so sorry. Marcenia, is she was daring. And one of the reasons that I think she was daring, and an action that proved that she was daring, was that she stole home. I also believe that she was skillful. Do you remember the part where she was about to get to home plate and she pumped her knees and she pumped her arms? She had some serious baseball skills. Even when she talked about how much she loved the game, she loved when that ball would sting her glove, her hand inside her glove, when she was about to tag somebody out. So she definitely had the skills. And all the boys that she played with said, she could run as fast as them, she could catch as well as they could. So she was skillful. And seeing her run fast and seeing her get down and get those balls, that proved that she was skillful. Those were her actions. She was also eager. Can you think of some things that she did that proved that she was eager to play? There was one day that it said that she was the first one on the field. So I'm going to add that to our chart. First on field. And that proved that she was eager. She was also self-confident. Were there any actions that you can think of that made you feel that she was self-confident? And I'm going to let you think about that yourself. I'm not going to write that one down this time. And I also feel like she was brave. And I'm thinking of a couple times in that story where she was brave as well. So I want you to think about those. So boys and girls, the next thing on your list of work that you need to do is a worksheet that talks about what the actions are that help you understand who the character is or what she does. So I want you to take any of these suggestions that I just wrote, or any other words that you can think of that might describe Marcenia, and some actions that were in that story that would help you describe that. Okay, good luck. When you are done, everybody, don't forget to take a picture of that work and send it in to your teacher. Okay? Bye-bye.